Tonight, the fury in Ferguson seems to have settled, but could the questions the protesters raised about racial divides, police tactics, and more push people to the polls this fall? And if so, why haven't Democrats tried to turn Ferguson political? Plus,
97% of the shooting victims in New York City are black or Latino. 90% of the murder victims are black or Latino.
New York City's former top cop Ray Kelly speaks exclusively to RFL tonight why he's defending stop and frisk. And the man who wants to run the U.S. Senate says if he does, expect more threats to shut down the government. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in again tonight for Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin in Ferguson, Missouri, where a new audio recording could help us learn more about the turn of events that led to the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. The FBI is reportedly questioning a man who turned the audio recording over to the authorities. He says that recording came in the middle of a video chat with a friend when the shooting began, and his computer picked up the shots. Officials say you can hear 6 shots fired, then a brief pause, followed by 4 more shots. Brown was shot 6 times, and officials say any pause in gunfire could be a big deal when the case comes to court. Meantime, the protests in Ferguson appear to have wound down, and there has not been any looting nor rioting in days. Many say the violence in Ferguson following the death of Michael Brown is just a symptom of larger problems: socioeconomic divides, institutionalized racism, and just plain politics. Advocates have launched voter registration drives across the city, which now has 5,000 new voters. But few Democratic leaders have been talking about Ferguson, and there are complaints the party could be missing out on issues that could work to their favor. Plus, 22% of self-identified Democrats are African American, according to the latest Gallup poll. And minority turnout is usually much lower and much more needed in midterm elections like the one coming up in November. Add to that an op-ed in the Times that pointed out, quote, no national Democratic politician, nobody of the sort who is likely to mount a presidential run anytime soon, has risen to give voice to the anger we're seeing in Ferguson. It continues, quote, nobody seems eager to make police abuses or racial injustice a key issue in a national campaign, even though an awful lot of Democratic voters could be activated on those issues. Well, since we're talking about politics, we've got a terrific political panel for you tonight. Jeannie Zaino is here. She, of course, a professor of political science at Iona College and a professor of campaign management at NYU. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Dominic Carter is here, a political journalist and author. And back from MIA status, former Connecticut Congressman Chris Shays, a Republican from the Nutmeg State, is back with us again. Nice to see you again.
Nice to be with you.
So let me start off with the first question. The issues that came up in Ferguson, police, overuse of police, the militarization of police, the racial divides, socioeconomic issues, those would seem like strong Democratic issues if anybody wants to turn them into a political issue. Or are we too close to the events of Ferguson to really think about politics with it at this point? Jeannie.
Andrew. No, you know, I think that it's a really important point. I think the governor actually missed a real point there, a time in which to make a case on this issue. But that said, I think the reason you're seeing some shyness on the part of Democrats on this issue is because they're not confident that if they stick their neck out, quote unquote, they're going to get turnout at the ballot box. And I think that's the real issue. We're in an election cycle in which turnout amongst Democrats is expected to be fairly low. Yes, this could turn out people, but if they stick their neck out on this issue as opposed to the issues that are registering in the polls, jobs, for example, the economy, right? If they stick their neck out on this and don't focus on other issues, that could be a recipe for disaster. So I think if somebody was to take the lead and to start to see movement in the polls, other people would follow, but we haven't seen that yet.
Are these the kinds of issues that can boost turnout, or do you think there's a greater fear, Congressman, that there would be turn off and that a lot of voters might blanch?
Members don't like to take risks during elections, and I think they, as you point out, don't know, how it will sound, how it will go. So they've got other issues they can focus on. But the bottom line is it appears that there was an overuse of force, obviously someone unarmed, but there's every indication that he might have been more aggressive than people think. So, and then, the one thing I always felt as a member of Congress, I've never had to leave my house every morning, say goodbye to my wife and say, I may not come back. A lot of police officers lose their lives every year. and they're asked to wait till someone else fires the first shot. Now, in this case, there wasn't a gun that could go off. But.
Dominic, we've seen reaction from minority communities across the country, not just Ferguson. I mean, we've seen it all across the country. And you and I know full well, everybody here knows, minority voters don't turn out in midterm elections anywhere near where they do in presidential elections, especially not elections where Barack Obama was on the ballot. This feels like this could be a recipe for Democratic turnout.
Well, yes and no. As been indicated, it's a very polarizing issue. If you are an elected official and you push and plug this, you may energize a certain portion of the base, but you may turn off another part of the base. So it might be a wash or a net loss at the end of the day. The problem in the black community as it relates to this issue, and Ferguson is a great example. We're looking at, some of the silent protests, if you will, that was going on, but it's a great example where it appears from what we have heard, the community does not like or agree with the sitting district attorney there. Yet he has been reelected 4 different times. So oftentimes when people ask me to help them from the public politically, my first question to them is, are you registered to vote? And if you're not registered to vote, then don't waste my time because I don't want to hear it. What are you doing for yourself?
The next question is, are you registered to vote? Do you vote?
Right, do you vote? And because in Ferguson, only 12% of the black vote has turned out. And that's one of the issues that Reverend Sharpton raised in a number of his comments there. Communities in color, you have to stop complaining and start voting again.
Yeah, but you just nailed it. Reverend Sharpton says something to you, it says something to the white community that's very different. I mean, because he's defended outrageous cases that turned out to be wrong. And so people don't want to get associated with him.
That is a problem. That is one of the problems. And so politically, and no Democrat in their right mind, it's just too raw right now to try and touch this politically. You're going to stay away from this issue with a 10-foot pole,
And I think there are a couple things here. One is that, as Dominic mentioned, do you risk, aggravating the other side, who are more likely to come out to the polls if you're a Democrat and you start taking this issue on? And then I'm so curious as to how people feel about the fact that Barack Obama, and I understand why, has been largely silent on this issue. And if he showed more leadership on this, and I understand again why that's difficult for him, if he showed more leadership, would others follow? But without that kind of leadership, how can you expect a congressman?
You're being kind to him. He was.
I try to be kind to everyone, Congressman.
You are. You're kind. But in this case, my goodness, he's on vacation, he's playing golf, and someone's gotten shot, and you've got unrest all around the world. Oh.
We are starting to hear rumblings from the White House that there may be a reconsideration of the program that puts military surplus in the hands of local police. You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is, and I was part of getting some of this equipment to our local, but I didn't realize I was getting some of the equipment they have. I mean, they are a military.
Can there be regulations on how police departments can use that gear once it's been given? Are there thresholds for just for active shooting scenes or just for terror threats?
If the government funds it, the government can say how it's used.
Do you think that's likely to happen? You think that's something we're going to see?
I think something has to happen. There has to be some definition.
But is it really the weapons and the machinery or the training that is?
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah.
I mean, the training is lacking. You don't get a sense that this was done at all in a place like Ferguson.
And in the decision-making process on when and where to use that hardware, I mean, we heard from Ray Kelly in your exclusive interview yesterday, Dominic, that the order to use tanks or to have rifles pointed at the protesters should never have happened, and he never would have done it. So it's not just the gear; it's when and where you
tanks.
use it.
I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
And armored plated stuff, the kind of stuff that was used against landmines in Iraq. And there are towns in our area. There are towns in Connecticut that have this kind of hardware now. Towns in New Jersey, towns all across the area. All right, we're going to take a break here on RFL. And when we come back, we're going to shift from the events in Ferguson to another issue of racial divide here in New York.
As far as releasing the video is concerned, I think you could be interpreted, and was interpreted, as an effort to, as they say, dirty up the victim
That from Dominic's exclusive interview with former New York City top cop Ray Kelly. Tonight, he strongly defends stop and frisk within the department. And he also lashes out at authorities in Missouri for releasing that Michael Brown police videotape.